Well, I want to thank you, Joseph, for being here. I want to introduce to our group. This is Joseph McIntosh. Joseph is a Richland High School alumni. You're going to hear a little bit about some of the things that he was involved in from an athletic standpoint. Just graduated from Baylor University and is now working on his Master's of Taxation at UTA. Now, he's also the son of Joey and Roxana McIntosh. Roxana obviously is involved in our 9th grade students in that area, and he is the cousin of Abigail McIntosh, the nephew of Johnny and Jeannie McIntosh. So got all that out of the way. That's who you are.
Tree.
Yeah. But we're glad you're here, man, this Tailgate Sunday. And by the way, let me say too that obviously this is a video. Joseph is engaged to be married, and on Sunday morning today, as you're watching this, he is involved at a kind of a nearly wed marriage enrichment seminar, and so that's where he is today. Couldn't be here on Sunday morning, but we're glad you're here now. Joseph, we just want to share there's a lot of people that are sitting in the audience. Some are athletes, and some are not athletes. Some are Christians. Some do not yet have a relationship with Christ. But we just want to talk about, you're not far removed from being a student athlete at Richland High School. And so we just want to hear some of your thoughts on some of the questions I want to ask you today. So first of all, talk to us a little bit about, if you can summarize your athletic career. What were you involved in at Richland? How long were you involved in that? Just tell us a little bit about that perspective.
Well, I played football and baseball all 4 years, and started on varsity as a sophomore for baseball, and pitched and played first base, and then as a junior, I started and played quarterback, and those are my 2 sports I played in high school.
That's great, man. Can you tell us just a little bit about what was the climate like on the teams that you played on at Richland, as far as from a spiritual standpoint? What did that look like, most of the guys on the team?
For the most part, I don't think a lot of them were active Christians. And I saw that, really, they would talk the talk, but they weren't really walking the walk. They weren't very active in their faith and very living it out. But if you ask them one-on-one, they would probably say, yes, I'm a Christian believer, but the way their actions, the way they live their life day to day, probably wasn't evident that they were believers in Christ.
I think that hadn't changed a whole lot. 6 years later, I think there's still students and athletes, but students too, that would say, hey, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I go to church, and they may not even go to church very often, but they kind of equate the two, but yet they're not living that life, and most people know that. Man, did you have a role as far as and if so, what was your role to help some of these guys that just weren't where they needed to be spiritually? How did you help them to see that there was hope in Christ, that there is a God, that there is something better than just living for the world?
I think what I did, I was just trying to be positive in everything I did. And obviously, the one thing I did thought I could do that was different from anyone else was always just be the guy that always lead a prayer before the game. And I would pray before the game, and just at first it was hard because you get to the very beginning of the first game and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to do this. You've been thinking about it for weeks ever since school started or the season started. But after you get past the first game and saying, hey, let me just pray real quick before the game. And then by the next game, even if I forgot, get too busy, start warming up, somebody would come up and say, hey, we're going to pray before the game, even for a person that you didn't even think that was having an impact that didn't even listen to you. So that's one thing I did, but then also being a positive in every action and, working hard and just actually just being positive in everything I do, just praising God, like it says, to glorify Him in all you do, and just do it for Him. And so that's what my deal was, not so much of speaking, but more acting that way and showing that my love for Christ in everything that I did.
Man, it's really easy to lose your witness, but it's probably really tough to keep that witness. You can say some things on the field or in the huddle that could make people go, oh, you're just like me. But it's good. It's great to hear. It sounds like you're saying, one of the things you really tried to do is just live out the things you did not say sometimes, or the things you did not do, the places you did go. But there was times where you definitely talked about Christ too, which is great. Well, let me ask you this. If you could go back, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and live out those 4 years again from a faith standpoint on the teams, would you do anything differently at all?
I'm probably more proactive in inviting my friends and teammates just to church or different activities that the church had, because you're kind of timid. I remember I was in high school, like, oh, I don't want to bring that up because they might think of me differently or it would be hard, and didn't want to force anything. But I think I would have taken a more proactive approach, because looking back, they respect you more for that. Even if they do say no, at least you planted a seed and they know that. So I would probably be more proactive in inviting people to church and just asking them about it and doing that way.
That's awesome. What would you say to, if there's an athlete, which there's some student athletes sitting in our crowd right now listening to this, what would you say to just a typical student athlete that's sitting here right now?
I would say just to keep on doing and glorifying God. I know I was reading a book one time, I guess it was my first year out of high school and first year in college, kind of first time off away and trying to, figure out what different things. And the quote that I read in this book, and I'm not sure who it was by, but it always said, life can only be lived forwards, but understood backwards. And that just really kind of hit home me then, because going things through high school that you don't realize might be family related, might be sports related, thinking I worked all summer all hard, and this is supposed to be my deal, and then you mess up and trying to figure that out. But when it comes back around, you see the purpose of it once it's 3 or 4 years down the road, or even 6 weeks later or so. And that's what I would do. And I would always say, in everything you do, be positive, because you don't realize who's watching you. Even people down from middle school, because when you're in middle school, you're growing up playing football and basketball, you live to go to Friday night games. And so I think that would be the number one thing, is just because someone's always looking up to you and you don't realize it. I even come back 4 years later, and somebody I didn't even know that was an eighth grade or freshman when I was a senior would always say, hey, you're so-and-so, I remember you, and I was a freshman. You probably don't know who I was, but I remember seeing you out there. And to me, I was kind of like, how, didn't realize that when I was at the time, that point, but that's what I would say. Just always, there's always someone watching you, and so it's.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, that's good. That's a great point. Man, let me on this final question. Most of the students that are sitting here, athletic, if they're an athlete or not, they have a relationship with Jesus Christ. They know Him, and they know the hope that He brings, and the forgiveness of sin, the purpose in life. They know all that. But in a group this size, there's going to inevitably be somebody that they know that they don't have Jesus in here. And they may know about Him, but they really don't know Him. What would you say to those students that maybe are just going, well, I need to wait till I get things right in my life, or maybe I'm older, or I need to kind of stop doing some things before I get serious with Jesus? What would you say to those types of kids right now?
I would say if you're at that point, you're kind of searching, trying to figure out, what you believe and who you believe in, and you've heard about before. I would say go ahead and make that commitment, and accept Christ, because I know it's hard when you're worried about what your friends might think, that the group of friends you run around in. And that's the hardest part, especially in high school, because there's so much peer pressure and everything else. Your main concern is, what are they going to think if I say, hey, this is what I'm doing now, and this is who I am. But to come to find out, it's the people, you'll have a larger impact on your friends that are non-believers, because they're going to, because 9 times out of 10, they're thinking the same thing. It's just going to take that one person to step up. When they see a difference in your life, they're going to see the change and say, hey, I want what he has. And that's what's going to cause people to look up to you and make that decision. Once you make it, the best decision you ever make, because you're going to get that all recognition from everybody, and not so much recognition, but get that assertiveness, I guess, from people that agreeing with you and looking after you, and then people following your lead, just to see how the impact it's made on your life.
Man, thank you for how you lived out for Christ those 4 years at Richland. You set the stage for where many of these students are even today. And thanks for sharing today just the encouragement to kids. Doesn't matter if they're an athlete or not, but to say, hey, look, to go God's way and to live for Christ and to be proactive and to be salt and light is the very best plan, and encourage them to do it. Thanks for doing that.
Well, thank you.